はい、皆さんこんにちは。米国特許セミナーパテントターミノロジーです。このシリーズでは、特許用語、表現などをできるだけわかりやすく解説しています。講師は、米国特許弁護士であるブライアン・エプスタインさんです。今回は、ナラティブクレイムというものについて見ていきたいと思います。ナラティブは物語風とか叙述的と訳されることが多いんですが、このセッションではナラティブクレイムを物語風クレームと呼びたいと思います。そして物語風クレームは米国ではあまり好ましくない形式と言われています。これについて早速ブライアンさんにご解説いただきます。So, Brian さん、please share your thoughts on narrative claims.
Sure. So let's begin by discussing what is a narrative claim. So examiners sometimes reject non-US origin cases, so for example, Japanese cases, as indefinite with form paragraph 7.34.07. And this form paragraph reads, the claims are generally narrative and indefinite, failing to conform with current U.S. practice. They appear to be a literal translation into English from a foreign document and are replete with grammatical and idiomatic errors. So you can see that the USPTO in this case is discrediting literal translations, right? They want applicants to start localizing the application as opposed to translating it, word for word. So, but that really doesn't answer what a narrative claim is, right? This is just the rejection that's used and is the source for the term narrative claim. So let's look at an example. So this one actually comes from a U.S. origin patent. This is actually the patent for Morse code and is patent number 1647 to Samuel Morse. And the reason this claim looks so different is that, this is a relatively old patent. It is an old patent. It's quite old. And, claiming was very different back then. So, I'm sure this claim was fine when it was written. Nowadays, we would consider this claim to be narrative. So let's read it. So it says the formation and arrangement of the several parts of mechanism constituting the type rule, the straight port rule, the circular port rule, the two signal levers and the register lever, and alarm lever with its hammer, as combining respectively with each of said levers one or more armatures of an electromagnet. So, if you look into the specification for this claim, the applicant defines what they mean by the type rule or the straight port rule and so on. But the issue is not just understanding the claim. The issue is understanding the scope of the claim. So what does this claim cover? What is not within the coverage of the claim, right? And so, while we're considering, what is covered and what is not covered, what we're trying to get at are more important issues like how would an examiner search such a claim, right? That's why an examiner is likely to make this rejection. They cannot search, or I guess it's an objection. They cannot search this type of claim very easily. They don't know what they need to find to reject this claim. But let's reverse it, right? Maybe some patent attorney believes that is a concern only for examiners and is not a concern for patent attorneys. Okay. Well, how would a patent agent or an engineer or an attorney determine infringement of this claim? Right? That's certainly within the realm of what, patent practitioners do. How would you construct a claim chart to show whether or not, a device includes this type rule or or straight port rule. And so to contrast with a narrative claim, the United States now requires what's called an element by element claim. And although this term isn't used in our federal regulations, the CFR does say that claim elements should be listed in multiple subparagraphs separated by a line indentation. All right, this is a requirement. And so, you'll see a lot of US origin applications that typically include that type of claims. And if we look at the Morse code patent and try to write that claim in this type of style, it'll look more familiar, right? It'll look like an apparatus comprising a plurality of signal levers and an alarm lever, including a hammer. And you can see that the different elements are outlined here. It's clear, what the statutory class is. It's an apparatus. It's clear, that the first element is a plurality of signal levers. It's clear that the second element is an alarm lever. It's clear what the relationship between the alarm lever and the hammer is. And this is what we mean by an element by element claim as contrasted to a narrative claim.
はい、ここまで、物語風クレームとは何かについて解説いただきました。物語風クレームとは、米国で一般的なエレメントバイエレメントクレーム、要素別クレームですね。これと異なり、一文の書き流しのようになっている長いクレームのことを言います。そして物語風クレームは、カバーする範囲を把握しにくいという問題があるということでした。はい、では次に行きたいと思います。ブライアンさん、Next slide, please.
Sure. So what does the JPO think here? So, I'm not a Ben-Rishi, but from my understanding, the JPO accepts either claim format. And so from the point of view of a Japanese applicant, perhaps, this issue is not one of acceptability, right? Because the JPO will accept either one. Instead, it's an issue of best practices, right? Which one should applicants choose? Which one should Ben-Rishi or possibly translators be providing for sophisticated clients that might file in the United States? And accordingly, this is a good way for Japanese patent agents, Ben-Rishi or engineers, to distinguish themselves from their colleagues or their competitors, right? Because if you are the Ben-Rishi that offers this service of drafting element by element claims, the JPO will accept them just as a JPO might accept a more narrative style claim. But your applicants will have an advantage when it comes time to apply in the United States, right? You already have element by element style claims. Prosecution will, it's more than just this form paragraph. The examiner can search the claims more easily. So, prosecution should move more efficiently.
はい、ここは、日本の特許庁の対応についてでした。日本の特許庁は、要素別クレームでも物語風クレームでもどちらでも受け付けるということでした。また、日本の代理人にとっては、要素別形式のクレームを書くことによって他との差別化が図れるのではないかということでした。はい、では次に行きたいと思います。Brian さん、next, please.
Sure. So what can applicants do here? So, of course, they can draft original claims in element by element style. That's what we kind of discussed on the previous slide. Alternatively, they can ask attorneys to draft US style claims. And In some instances, that means asking your U.S. representatives to draft a new set of claims before filing in the United States. Certainly, I'm sure some Ben-Rishi can modify a claim set that was originally drafted for Japan to modify it to become suitable for U.S. Filing. Another option is to file PCT applications in the U.S. as PCT bypass. Of course, this does not actually change the rejection or whether or not the claims are narrative, but certainly a PCT bypass, provides an easier opportunity to amend claims rather than the more formal preliminary amendment that might be necessary for a PCT, a national stage PCT application. The other thing to do, is don't worry if you receive this rejection. Some examiners include this form paragraph in every non-U.S. origin application. And the reason, I know that is I asked. I had a case that had, that was of Japanese origin. It included the form paragraph in the office action. I looked at the claims and I said, these claims are fine. There's nothing wrong with these. And so we conducted an interview in which that was one of the issues. And I asked the examiner and I said, these claims look fine to me. I don't see why you included this form paragraph. And the examiner said, I include that form paragraph in every non-U.S. origin application. So, I had to go back to the applicant and say, don't worry, everything's fine. But, so we've talked about what applicants can do. What can translators do, right? That's kind of our target with this patent terminology series. So the issue is you can't do much. This might be due to strict PCT requirements, where, it's supposed to be the exact same application in each country. You also might be limited by the translation budgets, right? It's one thing for an applicant to allow you to make this kind of modification to their claims, right? If they have a narrative style claim and you are translating in Japanese and you're translating it into English and you want to make it element by element style, it's one thing if the applicant allows you to do that. It's another thing if the applicant is, giving you a large enough budget to cover the time for that kind of effort. And so I would imagine that typically that's not an option. If it is an option, the suggestion is to focus on localizing the applications and the claims rather than literally translating. Right. We don't want the claims to mean for it to be a literal translation, where it sounds unnatural in English. We want this to be more like a localized translation, which is kind of what the USPTO's form paragraph is getting at. They want it to be such that a typical English language reader would get the same meaning from the translated document rather than seeing a literal translation. But still, that doesn't really get to what, might happen in a typical translation. So the suggestion is to try to include as much element by element style as possible. And by that, I mean, including sub-paragraphs, including line breaks, and just generally trying to make the claim as readable as possible, so that, if the examiner does make this objection or rejection, and, someone has to step in, such as a U.S. attorney, we have a good sense of where to begin amending the claim to make it into an element by element style.
はい、ここまでは出願人と翻訳者それぞれへの提案でした。出願人への提案は、日本語のクレームを要素別形式で書くこと、あるいは米国代理人に米国式クレームのドラフトを依頼すること、そして、PCT 出願の場合は、バイパス出願を検討してみるということでした。そして、翻訳者への提案は、直訳ではなくローカライズするよう心がけるということと、できる限り、要素別形式で翻訳するということでした。はい、今回は物語風クレームについて解説いただきました。今回はこれで以上になります。ご質問や扱ってほしいトピックなどがありましたら、YouTube のコメント欄に書いていただくか、スライド最後に記載のメールアドレスまでお気軽にご連絡ください。では本日もありがとうございました。失礼します。